He is ESPN's Tom Luginbill. You see him talking college football and recruiting. He is always kind with his time with us. You also see him on Monday Morning Live during the football season with the great Jim Dunaway. What is up, Luke? How are you?
Good morning, guys. It's good to actually see all three of you at once.
I know. It's good to have you back on.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
like I would go through and say, man, this feels like a critical signing day for all these teams, but I mean, I don't know how critical it really is anymore. I mean, it's still got to mean something. I mean, some of these guys do actually contribute and stick with the school for 3 or 4 years.
Well, you would like for 60% plus of them to do that. We're beyond the stacking class upon class upon class of 20 to 25, upwards of maybe 28 players in every class, and then having that expectation that they're going to be there for 3, 4, 5 years. You're going to have redshirted developmental guys that are going to be program guys, and they're the foundational pillars. Where we land right now is in a spot where they might be signing a financial aid agreement, but all that really is signing another level of a verbal agreement, because if things don't work out, whether it's whatever they were promised in NIL, a coaching change, they're not playing right away, poof, they could be gone. And don't be surprised with each and every one of these classes. I've been telling people this last week, don't fall in love with anybody, because the chances that those guys are going to be playing for you is getting slimmer and slimmer and slimmer with every year we continue to go forward with no regulation in the transfer portal.
Okay, at this point, though, Lugs, most surprising SEC team to the good and most surprising SEC team to the bad?
To the good, it would be the Florida Gators. I don't think there's any question about that. They flipped 11 players in the last 15 days is I think, a direct result of performance on the field. And when you have some of the moments that they've had, particularly late, where you got a lot of guys on the sideline, people are figuring out, well, wait a minute. These guys are going to be just fine. I think this thing's going to go the way that it should go, so on and so forth. And I'm looking right here. I would probably say I'm a little surprised that we're in a position where South Carolina, with the success that they have not bumped themselves up into the top 15. Doesn't mean they enter the day at number 23 for us. That can change by the end of the day. But the way that they have closed, very similar to Florida. I think Jordan Gidron is a really good player. DeMarcus Leach, the safety, is fantastic on defense. We know what they've built up front on both sides of the football, and they've got a quarterback. So the future's bright. I'm interested to see what the cycle then will look like for them come December 9th and beyond. Because while we're sitting here talking about signing day, the transfer portal for some programs is going to be way more important than today is.
That includes Kobe Prentice, who is a role player for Alabama, who's in the portal according to reports. Now, it doesn't officially open to December 9th. And then I guess he has a decision to make like Isaiah Bond did last year.
Yeah.
Is he going to go play in the playoffs, or is he going to go ahead and go to his next destination? So you got to keep an eye on people like that. Do you make your decisions on do I, at the last moment, do I go portal quarterback, or do I sign a kid who's got to develop? Is that the kind of decisions you're making on a coaching staff today? Do I go high school guy who I may or may not have after he develops under me, or do I go find a portal guy for a year or two? How important is it to have multiple years out of the portal?
Well, I think it's significant. I think you'd like to have 3+ if you can. I don't think a bunch of one and done does you anything from a stability and consistency and continuity standpoint. Listen, what ends up happening, and I'm going to actually use Kurt Signetti here as a great example. Everybody, there's going to be quarterbacks each and every year that will jump into the transfer portal that were highly, highly coveted out of high school, but haven't really played yet, right? So you're looking at that player and you're saying, okay, well, does that player do anything more for me than this high school player that I really like? I'd have to develop both of them. But then there's somebody like a Curtis Rourke at Indiana who had been a 3-year starter, unbelievably productive, maybe not the high-profile name, but you're looking at that guy, and he's way more intriguing than maybe the young guy is, especially if you need help right now. A guy that comes to mind just in the last 48 hours in that same regard is Connor Wigman at Texas A&M, who I think is 9-4 as a starter, has played well. He's had an injury history, but there's a lot of sample size of production there that's going to make him really, really attractive. So I think you're weighing a high-profile guy from another class that's unhappy, decides to leave, but he hasn't played yet, versus somebody that maybe didn't have that same type of accolade coming out and has developed through performance, and that guy becomes most attractive of all of them.
ESPN's Tom Luginbill on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Alabama and Auburn both have a quarterback signee in this class. Keelan Russell from Texas for Alabama, Deuce Knight from Mississippi for Auburn. If needed, Alabama's got Ty Simpson. Auburn likely going to be active in the portal. But if needed, do you see either one of those as a day one guy? Could they be a day one starter?
I see both of them as having the physical attributes to make the adaptation without having a steep learning curve. Now, I say that because that answer is almost entirely revolving around physical ability, talent, arm strength, accuracy, the ability to run, all of those sorts of things. What you don't know yet until you play the guy is how does he adapt in all of the other areas, the aptitude, the mental side of it, the mental toughness, the competitive temperament. What happens if he starts getting banged around? Things aren't going good. How do you preserve his confidence? There are all of these other variables. I mean, you look at Dylan Raiola last year. Everybody was so excited about Dylan Raiola. Dylan Raiola is talented, but it's a big jump at the quarterback position. What I think is probably most likely is you have a little more depth in the quarterback room at Alabama right now, which gives you a little more room to work with Keelan Russell, who I think is very reminiscent to a right-handed Michael Penix. And if you're Auburn, you've got to be looking at Deuce Knight to push immediately. And by the way, that just came across the wire, so that's not a commitment. That's a sign now.
Mm-hmm.
And that they need him to improve that room. And if that means he and Walker White are banging out and battling and they're getting after it, and that improves the room, great, because I think we all know that's what has to happen for them. And listen, they've got a really strong class. I think barring something odd, both Alabama and Auburn are going to sign top 5 classes. But the quarterback position, to your point, is so critical.
Yeah, so both Russell and Knight have officially signed at Alabama and Auburn now. So the quarterbacks in this class are safely dotted, lined, and the ink is dried. I wanted to ask you before we move on and talk about the game itself in college football, just what you were just talking about, the Auburn and Alabama coaching staffs, general managers. What has been your impression of what Hugh is doing, and then what Kalen DeBoer has been able to do in a shorter period of time as he jumped in at the job in Tuscaloosa? Take Auburn first, and then tell me about Alabama.
Well, I think where Auburn's done a really nice job is, number one, they've addressed the quarterback position, but they're continuing to make adds along the offensive and defensive front. Jared Smith, our 4th-ranked defensive end, 2nd-ranked highest player in that class. They have a top 3 corner in Blake Woodby. All of the areas that we talk about as premium positions, pass rusher, corner, offensive line, quarterback, that is where Auburn has done, I think, a really good job of continuing to upgrade the roster. For Alabama guys, for all of the criticism of how the season has gone and 9-3 and at times haven't looked good and things of that nature, well, I'll tell you one thing that has not changed is the caliber of player that's been committed to this class is no different than what's happened under Nick Saban's leadership, right? The difference now is, and Nick Saban got out right on the verge of this, is you sign all these guys and you're super excited about them and you've got this wealth of talent on paper. How do you keep them all happy? How do you keep them all in the house? But for you got the number 1 ranked dual threat quarterback. We talked about him and Keelan Russell, a top 5 offensive tackle in Ty Haywood, a top 4, top 2, top 5, outside linebacker, corner, running back, and athlete. I mean, that's just at the top third of their class.
Wow.
And those are national numbers. So that has not dipped in any way, shape, or form, which is a real positive. And as I mentioned, now you got to come through in terms of developing players. You got to come through with what was promised. You have to be able to get guys engaged early so that you can try to build some foundation. I think that's the biggest challenge right now with coaches. It's such a transactional sport that having to turn over 30, 40, 45 players in a calendar year, all of a sudden is the norm instead of the exception.
I wanted to ask you about Lincoln Riley because, year 3 was a disaster as far as wins and losses. I personally thought they were a better team overall. Just some really disappointing fourth-quarter losses. With all that said, they lost to Jerome Miles, who is now looks like he's going to Texas A&M. And the decommits have been just, they're every other day, it seems like, for Lincoln Riley. What do you attribute this to? Is there a rumor out there he's not going to be back? What's going on right now in Los Angeles?
I think prospects are very wary of instability, and not quite knowing from a leadership standpoint, given how the last 3 years has gone, how much longer this could continue to go, particularly in the fall of 25, if things don't go well. That scares kids. And the reality is it's probably being used against them in recruiting and against Lincoln Riley from a negative recruiting tactic of why would you go all the way out there, especially if you're not a West Coast kid, but why would you go all the way out there and, they're not, that staff may not even be there next year. And that stuff's very, very real. We know they have resources. We know they have money. What Lincoln Riley and that program have not been able to do, and I agree with you, Lance, I thought they improved this year on defense in particular, weren't anywhere near the offensive football team they thought they were going to be. But they have not been able to go out and get the Dylan Stewarts of the world, right? They haven't been able to go out and get these difference makers up front on either side of the ball that could elevate the program beyond what all of their skill says that they are. And I will still maintain, and this goes all the way back to Oklahoma, it was the same storyline. You could get through it and you could navigate the Big 12, but when you played anybody that was any good up front in the college football playoff, you lost. And what were the common denominators of all those teams? Clemson, Alabama, right? It's the same thing. We're better than you up front. And unless that changes, it's going to be more of the same for SC.
Okay, so what's going to happen? College football rankings, we started the show with it. Everybody was waiting to see Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina, how that lined up. Alabama obviously in front of those teams. Now it looks like it comes down to the ACC Championship game. SMU wins, Alabama's in. If Clemson wins, it becomes a debate between SMU and Alabama. Where are you on that debate, and how do you think it falls out here?
I'm on the SMU side of that thing. I think winning 11 games is really, really important. And I think with all of this talk that everybody's been bantering back and forth about, whether it's smart to play in a conference championship game, does that hurt you? Does that help you? And the resounding answer to that from everybody is we're not going to hold that against you. Okay, then let's not hold it against anybody. Now, I do think game control and how a game could be played could play a role in that. I mean, if SMU goes out and lays an egg against Clemson and loses by 27 points, that's a different conversation. They have not shown a penchant for doing that. I think the one thing about SMU and all of this is they're one of the 3 teams that have won 9 games versus Power 4 opponents, and they have not gone out and looked bad. Like, they are a very clean, efficient football team that can run the football and stop the run, and they've had outstanding quarterback play. For me, I think that my takeaway from the evening was more about just the lack of consistency of the results of games. You have a Georgia team that goes and loses on the road to Ole Miss, and they drop 9 spots. Okay, that's a ranked Ole Miss team. But Ohio State loses at home to a 6-5 team with a walk-on quarterback and drops 4. Like, how do you quantify that? And so the consistency for me in terms of how they're valuing losses and where they're placing people is a little bit of a head scratcher right now. I really don't have an issue with Alabama being in the college football playoff if they get in. I think the issue that most people have, and I can see this, is that the Oklahoma loss is a bad, bad loss. And I think what the committee said last night, and Ward Manuel said it right out loud, is we valued the wins and the ranked wins over Alabama over Miami, despite Miami's losses being to, on the road, a pretty darn good Georgia Tech team, and then a 9-3 team on the road at Syracuse. So the wins matter more for them. And I was also intrigued at how Ward Manuel last night flat out came out and confirmed, and Reese Davis, he pressed him on it. So are you saying that if you don't play this weekend, you are not changing the rankings? Well, that's the best news Alabama could hear.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, they still need help, but they still need help, but they know they're not going to fall out of the blue, right?
They know they're not going to fall, right?
That's right.
Then it does, and I talk about the consistency of where you drop somebody. In the case of South Carolina, do I think they're probably playing the best football right now? They've beaten 3 top 25 teams in the last 6 weeks. The quarterback's a nightmare. They can play defense. The problem is they have the head-to-head, and they've lost it to both Ole Miss and Alabama. And you can't overcome that.
Hey, does South Carolina have the money to keep him? Because I think he is going to be the next superstar. We all agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, they might have to keep him for Virginia Tech at some point here in the near future. Who knows, right? Listen, I thought when that hire was made, it was a bit of a finance hire, meaning it was a bit of a risk, but it was cost effective, and it works. And if it works out, it looks fantastic, and that's exactly how it has played out. I do think that they've got enough money to be competitive, because they're showing very publicly that they want to be competitive and are willing to be competitive in the NIL market with the best freshman player on their team. So I think that's an encouraging sign if you're talking about retaining a coach.
Yeah. He was talking about LaNorris Sellers. You're talking about Shane Beamer.
Oh, I'm talking about Shane Beamer.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought so too.
No, I was talking about, I mean, Shane Beamer did a great job this year. I put more stock into LaNorris Sellers moving forward. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, how much is this kid worth in the portal? And do you think, South Carolina, they've got SEC money, but they ain't got money that some of these other teams have got.
Well, and remember when they started to talk about Dylan Stewart, right? That's going to take a big chunk of the money. So can you afford both of them? And then you're going to have to make a decision and figure it out. I think that he would be the most highly coveted player in the transfer portal, regardless of position, and deservedly so. I would hope that, and I hope this for all kids, because maybe it's just the old school guy in me, but I would hope that there would be a want to stay at South Carolina. You signed there for a reason. They've invested in you. They've believed in you. They've developed you. You've gotten better and better and better, improved incrementally as a passer this year. Like, I would hope on his side of things that he would want to be a South Carolina Gamecock and then come to an agreement that benefits both in the institution and the kid.
All right, he's ESPN's Tom Luginbill at Tom Luginbill on social media. Thank you for the time on signing day, Lugs. Much appreciated. Have a great remainder of your week, my friend.
I will. Have a great week, guys. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that good stuff.
Yep, all that good stuff. See you, buddy. Thank you. Lugs with us, apparently for the final time of the year.
I mean, apparently.
The Johnston Harvey.
We didn't even talk any entertainment with Lugs.